Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone, to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Steve, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you've gotten over your hangover.
My hangover?
Your movie hangover, which is a thing. We have decided it's a thing.
We have learned that once you go to the TCM Film Festival and watch 12, 13, 14 movies over the course of 4 days, you have a hangover afterwards.
You have a hangover. The day after, we both were so tired. And don't get me wrong, it was a good tired. It was a fabulous experience, which is what this episode is going to be about. But man, it's a true thing. Maybe it was all the popcorn we ate.
Maybe so. I was on the couch for the entire day. I was so hungover from all those great movies.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into the festival. I'd love to start, if we could, by sharing some of the people that we talked with at the festival. And we're going to introduce you to a couple of them right now. Steve and I are here with two people that have been coming to the festival, one since the beginning and one almost since the beginning. So tell us your names and where you're from.
Dale Barber, Wilson, Wyoming.
Sean Moore, Apex, North Carolina.
We would love to know, what is your takeaway from just generally having been here all these years, and how has it changed over the years?
Well, it's great because everyone has the same obsession. So, once you discover that, it's like you got to go back. It just pulls you back, And we were just talking about the change, about how it's, I don't know if you'd call it a little more sophisticated, but it's maybe better organized.
Yeah, and for me, it's about seeing movies, classic movies, of course, being classic movies obsessive, and seeing them on the big screen for the first time, but also the whole communal experience of it, not just watching it with a bunch of other fans, but then standing in line like we are now and sharing stories. It's like, hey, did you see this? How did that go? How was that guest? And, I have friends now for past 15-year-old friends now because of people I met the first year.
There really is a sense of community there. I can totally feel what he's talking about.
Oh, I sense it too. I think the friendships made at this film festival are enduring and really wonderful.
Yes.
What we'll do is we'll sort of take you through our journey at the Turner Classic Film Festival. So we're just going to start with day one. Day one, I saw, and I've seen it many, many times, but I've never seen it on the big screen. And from what I understand, there were a couple of pieces of the movie that were restored that had been cut out over the years that they had placed back in the movie. So that was really cool.
Yes.
It is Suddenly Last Summer, 1959.
Wow.
Of course, it's Columbia Pictures, and it was introduced by filmmaker Nick Davis. And this particular movie, of course, we all know it's directed by Joseph Mankiewicz, and it's written by Gore Vidal and Tennessee Williams. However, Tennessee Williams says that he had nothing to do with the screenplay.
Okay.
He was given credit, but he didn't want credit based on one of his short plays.
Right. But is it wildly different from his play?
It is a little different.
Okay.
It definitely is, but not wildly, but certainly.
But he still didn't want credit.
Yeah, it's a one act. So interesting. But, for people who don't know what movie is about, it's about a young socialite named Katharine Holly, played by the stunning Elizabeth Taylor. And she's been traumatized and committed to a sanitarium after witnessing her cousin's violent death on a trip to Europe. And then her aunt, Violet Venable, played by the incomparable Katharine Hepburn, she wants to hide the events of her son's death, and she attempts to bribe this young surgeon, played by Montgomery Clift, to perform a lobotomy on Katharine.
Well, that's just rude.
That is just rude, yes. But the surgeon decides to find out the truth about Katharine's situation before he takes any action.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it's an amazing film. It was nominated for 3 Oscars, including Best Actress for Elizabeth Taylor and Best Actress for Katharine Hepburn and Best Art Direction. I think what probably happened is Katharine Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor canceled each other out, and neither one of them won.
Because they were both so good.
Yeah. And in my opinion, Katharine Hepburn should have been nominated as supporting actress. And I think had that been the case, Elizabeth Taylor would have won. Elizabeth Taylor did win the Golden Globe for her role, and she ended up behind the scenes. She used her clout to get her good friend Montgomery Clift hired on this film. After his infamous car accident, he became dependent on drugs and alcohol, and no production company would insure him. So Elizabeth Taylor put her reputation on the line and said, I will personally guarantee that Montgomery will be great. So, they acquiesced, and he's in the movie, and he's fantastic, but he did struggle. He struggled a lot during the production. And Joseph Mankiewicz, he wanted to fire him a couple of times, but Mama Bear, Elizabeth Taylor, and Katharine Hepburn said, you replace that boy and we walk off this production.
And you do not want to cross those two ladies.
Exactly. So it was a fantastic movie to kick things off for me, and I'm so glad I got to see it.
That's wonderful. That sounds fantastic. I know that we talked about in the preview episode, you wanting to see The Divorcée.
Yes.
Day 2. How was The Divorcée?
The Divorcée was interesting. But first of all, it was introduced by this really wonderful woman named Marcia Gordon. And I wasn't familiar with her, but she is the professor and director of film studies at North Carolina State University. And she's written many books. Her most recent book was Becoming the Ex-Wife, The Unconventional Life and Forgotten Writings of Ursula Parrott. And she's also working on a biography of pioneering female director Dorothy Arzner. The Divorcée, I thought, was interesting.
Okay. That's not a ringing endorsement,
yeah, and I think it's maybe because of the subject matter and how women are portrayed.
Okay.
It was directed by Robert Z. Leonard, and it was written by Nick Grind, Zelda Sears, John Meehan, and it's based on a book by Ursula Parrott, who, of course, Marcia Gordon is a huge aficionado on. The movie starred Norma Shearer in her Oscar-winning performance, and it's basically the story of a marriage that collapses. Norma Shearer's character, Jerry, she's been married to Ted, played by Chester Morris, for 3 years, but he has an affair. And he goes to her, and this is the part that maybe bugs me. He goes to her and says, I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. This shouldn't affect our marriage. You should be able to forgive and forget.
They always say that.
Well, Jerry, played by Norma, she returns the favor by having an affair of her own with one of Ted's best friends, Dawn, played by Robert Montgomery.
Okay.
So when she then goes and says, well, I kind of did the same thing, and now we're even, so I guess we can move on. Well, guess what? Ted couldn't handle it.
Of course. Of course.
It was fine when it was him having the affair.
Right.
But when she had the affair back, forget about it. So the marriage collapses, and it's just all about their journey post-separation and where their lives go. And it was Ted struggles with alcoholism and depression, and Jerry has a series of flings, and then she finally reunites with another guy who's sort of pined for her for years. But I don't know. I don't know what message it said about marriage. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I liked it. I don't think I loved it, but I did love Norma Shearer's performance. It's absolutely stunning. I can see why she won the Oscar, and it really gave me a new appreciation for her.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Heaven Knows Mr. Allison.
Yeah, no, this is one I know that you particularly liked. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, let me tell you, like I said, give me Robert Mitchum and an Irish nun, right? It's set during World War II in the South Pacific. It's directed by John Huston. It's based on the novel by Charles Shaw, and the screenplay is actually co-written by Huston and John Lee Mahan. Robert Mitchum is so incredibly handsome in this film. Now, I know he's known for that, but there's something about him in this film.
He's sweaty and dirty.
Is that what it is?
There's something about sweat and dirt on a hot man.
And he's a Marine, and he's crawling up on the shore, and he's coming to this secluded island after having been attacked by the Japanese. Deborah Kerr is on this island all by herself. She is about to take her final vows, and the two of them become trapped on this island together as they try to hide from the Japanese who land on the island to invade it. I think the thing that was so impressive about this film to me is director John Huston.
Yes, absolutely.
His direction, it's really just two characters.
Yeah, there's really no one else.
But he creates such tension in the story with the Japanese and the whole war backdrop. He uses the wind, he uses gunfire, he uses the ships in the sea. I mean, he really does that so beautifully. And then, of course, he also is able to capture that tension between Mitchum and Kerr.
Sexual tension.
Oh my gosh. And Huston actually said that this was one of the best things he ever made. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective perspective on it. Together, Kerr and Mitchum are they're sublime.
Yeah, such great chemistry. And you wouldn't think they would have the great chemistry they have. Yeah.
You would not. And I hate to say this with Lindsay here, but if I'd been alone on that island with him, I'm not sure how that would have gone.
I think I know.
He's the perfect combination of tough and vulnerable. And then you match that up against Deborah Kerr, who's got this wonderful, gentle stoicism. They're really wonderful together. She received an Academy Award nomination for her performance.
And he should have, by the way.
And he should have as well. We talked in the preview episode about her Irish accent. You mentioned that critics didn't care for it.
They did not like it.
Do you know what? It didn't distract. So that was really
distract me either,
the most important thing. And here's the thing. It's such a trope. They never talk about where she came from.
No,
they
it
never
doesn't matter.
But she had to be an Irish nun because that's what all the nuns were. I mean, it's sort of like having an Irish priest. It's like, you know.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, Danny Huston was supposed to introduce the film and he wasn't able to be there. But what a great film. If you have not seen it, add it to your list.
Yeah, completely agree with you. The next movie that I saw, and you did not get to see this, but I saw, and again, it's one of my favorites. I've seen it a million times, but never on the big screen the way it was meant to be seen.
Yes.
And that was 1945's The Enchanted Cottage.
Such a great story.
Yeah, directed by John Cromwell. And it was introduced by his son, the wonderful actor Jamie Cromwell, who had some really great insights into his family and his relationship with his father, which apparently was a little rocky and competitive. But Enchanted Cottage, it's written by Herman J. Mankiewicz and DeWitt Bodine, and it's based on the 1923 play by Arthur Wing Pinero. This movie, for those who don't know, it's about this war pilot named Oliver Bradford, played by Robert Young, and he's disfigured from wounds he suffered in the war, and he runs away, kind of in shame, away from his beautiful fiancée, played by Hilary Brooke, and his domineering mother, played by Spring Byington, and he rents this cottage out in the middle of nowhere from this kind-hearted woman named Mrs. Minute, played by the incredible Mildred Natwick.
Yeah,
and while he's there, he meets this very plain-looking but very gentle housekeeper named Laura Pennington, played by one of my favorites, Dorothy McGuire.
Now, how Dorothy McGuire could ever be plain is...
Well, that was the joke, is like she's supposed to be this plain woman, and all they did is they put some kind of a film on her teeth, and they gave her sort of a unibrow. That's all they could do to make her look ugly.
All right.
But as he and Laura begin to learn more about each other, and they see past their outer imperfections, they discover what true beauty is. And there's a very mystical element to it that I won't give away, but it's just such a great movie. A lot of people may know this movie because Carol Burnett famously did a parody of it on her show, and she called it The Enchanted Hovel, with herself in the Dorothy McGuire role and Dick Van Dyke playing the Robert Young role.
How perfect.
Really, really fun. So it did receive one Oscar nomination for Best Score for Roy Webb, but great movie. Loved seeing it on the big screen.
So day 3 was the day that you and I sat next to each other for like 12 hours.
Oh my God, this was such a great day. I loved it.
It was a great day. Yeah. It started with Daisy Canyon 1947.
Which neither of us had seen. Yeah, which was rare.
Yeah,
I love
all right.
that.
So what did you think?
You know what? I like this movie a lot. And there's a lot to like about this movie.
Yes, I love where you're going with this.
It's 20th Century Fox. It was directed by the great Otto Preminger. It was written by David Hertz, based on the 1945 book by Elizabeth Janeway. It stars Joan Crawford in all her glory.
Yes.
Dana Andrews, who's one of my favorite actors.
Me too.
Henry Fonda, who's amazing. Ruth Warwick, and Martha Stewart, who is really good in this. And it's not the Martha Stewart who bakes bread and organizes homes.
Right.
The movie was interesting. And again, I think it had a lot to do with male-female relationships. And I think that's the complicated part of it.
Right. You mean in that day and age.
Day and age.
It is very complicated looking at it now.
A lot of misogynistic angles to this movie that I thought would never fly today.
Maybe a sexual assault that happens to Joan Crawford that's just sort of like left,
Yeah. But, just kind of a brief synopsis if you don't know the movie. Daisy Kenyon, played by the great Joan Crawford, she's this artist living in Manhattan, and she's in love with Dan, played by the great Dana Andrews. And he's this busy lawyer who's unhappily married to the volatile Lucille, played by Ruth Warwick. And while Daisy waits for Dawn to get a divorce, she begins seeing Peter, played by Henry Fonda, who's a veteran who's recently returned from World War II. So after Dan leaves town for a few weeks to defend a Japanese American who had his property taken away from him during the war,
right.
Daisy impetuously marries Peter. Well, when Dan man returns, this complicated affair becomes this even more tangled situation. It had some interesting things to say about male-female relationships, but it left me wanting more.
It left me wanting more. And, I think part of it is just the script in general,
Yes.
which it was reported that Dana Andrews and Henry Fonda disliked the script. They were contractually obligated, though, to do it. I did like that Crawford is a working woman. You don't
Yeah.
often see that
Yeah,
in that.
she's not just a housewife or a mother. I like that too.
She's an artist.
Yeah.
She is independent. I wish that she could see that she didn't need either of those two men.
Exactly. Because she was enough.
Yeah, she
Joan,
was enough.
You are enough.
And, it's 1947, not 2025.
Yeah.
And nowadays that would be very different.
Big difference.
Before we get into the rest of the festival, it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And one of the movies that we'll be talking about in the second half of our show is The Big Combo, which is an incredible film noir that I love. It stars Cornel Wilde and Richard Conte, Gene Wallace, and Helen Walker. The question is, who was originally supposed to play the villain, Mr. Brown, in the film, which was ultimately played by Richard Conte? And why did he drop out?
Great question. I know the answer. We'll be right
thought
back
you might.
with that and more after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first, another stop on our Hollywood tour. Safe to say that one of the most popular stars of the golden era of Hollywood was Jimmy Stewart, the actor and military aviator who embodied the American ideal in the mid-20th century. Known for his drawl and everyman persona, Stewart's 80-film career spanned from 1935 to 1991. The love of his life was his wife, Gloria, but here's something you may not have known. After Gloria's death in 1994, Stewart chose not to replace the battery in his pacemaker. That quiet but powerful decision reflected a deep grief and an acceptance of mortality. The couple had been married for nearly 45 years, and Gloria's passing left a profound emptiness in Stewart's life. Stewart once said that Gloria was, quote, the sunshine of my life, and without her, life had lost its glow. In declining that procedure, he wasn't giving up. He was letting go, ready to be united with the love of his life. He passed away just 3 years later at age 89. In his final words, his family confirmed, Stewart whispered, I'm going to be with Gloria now. And now, back to Steve and Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get further into our experiences at the TCM Film Festival, wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week, and this was a really sweet one and a really fun one. We got an incredible email from Marissa Gonzalez from Fort Worth, Texas. She and her husband own a nail salon called BMC and Company in Fort Worth, and they have this classic cinema theme in their store, which is just amazing. She was kind enough to send Nan and I some photographs, and there's these beautiful pictures of classic film stars all around, but the best part, there's TCM on the big screen TV nonstop in her salon.
It's perfection. I want to get my nails done there next time we're in Fort Worth.
I know. So if you're in the Fort Worth area, definitely check out BMC and Company Nail Salon and watch your favorite Betty Davis movie. So Marissa Gonzalez and her husband are our listeners of the week.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Well, our next film, there was some emotion going on in this one, right? This is
Surprisingly
Yeah,
so.
surprisingly.
I was surprised by how emotional this movie made me.
This is Rhapsody in Blue, 1945. It's quite a long film. It was introduced by George Feltenstein, who's currently the library historian at Warner Brothers. What was cool about this is a world premiere restoration featuring nearly 13 minutes of never before seen footage, including musical numbers that were cut from the U.S. release. It stars Robert Alda.
In his screen debut.
Written by Howard Koch, Elliot Paul, and Clifford Odets, Harry Chandley, and Robert Rawson are uncredited, but they had something to do with the script. It also stars Joan Leslie, Alexis Smith, Morris Kornowski, Rosemary DeCamp, and Charles Coburn, which is an amazing cast.
Great cast.
And then they also have a lot of people appearing as themselves.
And this was the best part for me. I loved it.
Hazel Scott, Anne Brown, Oscar Levant, band leader Paul Whiteman, Al Jolson in a really cringy blackface number.
Oh, yeah.
George White and Elsa Maxwell. I mean, all these people that knew him and worked with him.
And it really added to the authenticity of his story, having these people that knew him and worked with him in the movie.
Yes, and it's essentially a biography piece, but they took some liberties with his life.
Yes. For people who don't know, it really starts with the childhood of George Gershwin, played by Robert Alda, and it just shows his musical ability throughout the years and how his parents help him, and they place him to be trained trained by this professor played by Albert Basserman. And it really is about him wanting to play popular music and not play classical music as he's expected. He focuses on show tunes and jazz. And while he's studying, he performs at these vaudeville theaters and he tries to sell his songs to music stores. It really encompasses his entire life from childhood to his incredible success on Broadway. Originally, the director wanted Tyrone Power to play the lead, but was sort of forced to use Robert Alda because Tyrone Power wasn't available. The director says that apart from Alda's casting, he was happy with the film.
Okay.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Well, the film was also nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Original Score and for Best Sound Recording.
The film was actually shot in 1943, but it was held back from a release due to World War II. However, it was screened in that full form for members overseas. This screening included an overture added by the Warner Brothers Orchestra, which both of us could have done without because
Yeah, a little long.
it was a little long. I found it interesting that Oscar Levant, who was in real life a good friend of George Gershwin's, he plays the piano himself, as we all know.
As we all know.
But he also dubs Robert Alda's piano solos as well, which is quite a lot of trickery back in the day. I don't even know how they would have been able to do that.
But did you notice this? And I noticed there's a couple of shots where it goes from the fingers on the keys and then it pans up and it's Robert Alda. So Alda had to have had some skill on the piano.
He had to
fake
know
it.
something about it. One of the most moving sections was the actual performance of the piece, Rhapsody in Blue. In the storyline, it's kind of the taking off point of his career
Yes.
into superstardom.
Oh, yeah.
When it's performed normally in concert, it's around 16 minutes long. In this film, it's only 9 minutes. And this is achieved by accelerating the tempo because the filmmakers were worried that visually it would not be interesting enough. They were wrong there.
They were so wrong,
They
yes.
didn't need anything. They could have just had one camera sit watching the orchestra. But they do encompass the emotional responses from the audience, which I found then like I was one of the people in that orchestra hall listening to Rhapsody in Blue for the first time. Here were our thoughts right after the film. Okay, we're in the theater. We just finished watching Rhapsody in Blue.
We're emotional.
I'm so emotional.
It was surprisingly so touching.
It was beautiful. I mean, we all know Rhapsody in Blue, and when you hear it and see it with this amazing orchestra.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
But, oh my gosh, it's just incredibly moving. I'm kind of speechless.
I know, and Robert Alda was so good. I'm just shocked he didn't become a bigger star. We were just talking about
a tad stiff, but it was his film debut.
Yeah.
And he's so handsome.
I know.
I mean, he was just phenomenal.
And for me personally, I did get a little emotional seeing Joan Leslie up there because she was a really dear friend of mine, and just there's certain expressions that she would make on the big screen that I've seen her make it in real life, and it really got me emotional because I miss her.
Yeah, she was what a star in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, she does it all. Well, we just highly recommend this one.
Yeah.
All right. So the extended version of this film that we saw the world premiere of is going to be available on Blu-ray May 27th.
Now, the next movie that we saw, and we saw this together, and this was one of my favorite movies of the entire festival.
Okay, me too.
Yes, I'm surprised. It's a movie that I wasn't familiar with. I'd never seen. And from what we understood, it had been out of commission for decades. And somebody found a copy, they restored the print, and we got to see it on the big screen. It's a Western called Gunman's Walk from 1958, which was a Columbia Pictures movie, which was directed by Phil Carlson, was written by Frank S. Nugent, based on a story by Rick Hardman. And the greatest part of all, it was introduced by Eddie Muller, and he interviewed my buddy Keith Keredine.
Yes.
Keith and I have known each other for a while. He starred in a movie that I produced back in 2006, maybe. And I just loved seeing Keith up there talking about Westerns because I know it's such an important part of his career. But this movie was just sublime. It starred the incredible Van Heflin, and in a shocking turn, it stars Tab Hunter in what I think is the best performance that man has ever given in his career.
I agree.
It's just phenomenal. It also stars James Darren, who's wonderful, and Katharine Grant, a little bit before she marries Bing Crosby and becomes Mrs. Bing Crosby.
And she was very good,
She was wonderful. And it starred Bert Convy, believe it or not, the talk show, game show host.
And he was good, too.
And he was good, although he was playing a half Native American, but that's a whole other story.
Cringy, but, you know.
And it also also featured a character actor I love, Edward Platt,
Yes.
who most people know as the commissioner from Get Smart.
And he was very good.
So good, so good. A little synopsis about the movie. It's about this rancher named Lee Hackett, played by Van Heflin, and he kind of spends too much time trying to keep his violent, sort of bad son, Ed, played by Tab Hunter, in check. Well, while doing this, he neglects the needs of his other son, the son that kind of does the right thing and is always on the right side of things, Davy, played by James Darren. Well, when Ed's temper results in the death of this innocent Native American, played by Burt Convy, Lee tries his best to cover up the son's tracks by making this deal with his unscrupulous horse trader who falsely testifies in Ed's behalf and gets him off. It becomes clear to Lee that his son Ed is troubled and he's not going to change and something has to give. So it really becomes this showdown between father and son.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
It really is. We talked about it being almost biblical, Shakespearean.
Yes, it is.
And can we just talk about Tab Hunter again for just a second?
Yes.
So in 1958, he was Warner Brothers' biggest star. I would imagine that taking this role as the bad son was probably a risky thing. He saw his character in this film as a Nazi in the Old West.
I love that.
Which, when you watch the film, you can really see. Eddie Muller shared this because he co-wrote the autobiography with
which
Tab Hunter.
I don't think I knew that.
And so he had some wonderful insights about Tab Hunter. He found the character by buttoning the top button of his shirt, which makes him this very kind of uptight, really Aryan kind of looking, youth. And it's a subtle thing, but it really adds to the character. We've talked about Van Heflin before, but I just wanted to share what Tab Hunter thought about working with Van Heflin. He really looked up to him, admired his talent, his professionalism. Hunter was quoted as saying, Van was a powerhouse. He was a fabulous actor and a terrific human being. I was crazy about him. You learn so much working with an actor like Van. So
Wow.
Even though father and son on screen were against each other, it sounds like they had a great time making that film.
The next movie we saw together was We're No Angels, 1955, Paramount Pictures, directed by Michael Curtiz, was written by Ranald McDougall. It was based on the work by French playwright Albert Ussat, and it was, what did you think?
It was the end of the day. We had watched 4 movies and my body was twitching. I was very restless. However, given all of that, it's very enjoyable and it should actually be kind of a yearly Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's kind of a Christmas movie. You really get the spirit of Christmas in the most unlikely way.
Yes.
With 3 escaped convicts who basically come to this store on Devil's Island and they meet the owner and his wife, played by Leo G. Carroll, and Joan Bennett, and their daughter, played by Gloria Talbot. And they decide to help these people because they're very kind. They invite them to Christmas and they're struggling to keep their store afloat. And so they intervene, and it's just delightful.
Right. And it's so funny because they keep saying, well, we need to slit their throats and steal their money. It's Humphrey Bogart, Peter Ustinov, and Aldo Ray. And yet they never do because this family just, they fall in love with this family.
Them.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about this was we got to see it in VistaVision.
With the VistaVision projector.
Yeah, which is really a treat. And it was pristine. That print was amazing. I can see what they mean about VistaVision being the most saturated, beautiful prints around.
Yeah, and Perspecta Sound, which
Yes.
I had not heard of. 1954 technology that creates a stereophonic effect from a monophonic optical soundtrack. Okay, what does all that mean? It basically is like the surround sound that we have today.
Yeah.
You can hear the sound move across the screen.
And another cool thing is we got to see it in the big Chinese theater. And if you haven't been in that theater, it is one of the most beautiful, spectacular theaters in all of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's a must. You got to see a movie in there. The next one we've talked about a lot on this podcast, so we're going to do a quick recap on this. It's The Big Combo, 1955. This one, too, was a world premiere restoration. It was a beautiful print. Eddie Muller was so excited to introduce this one with Ernest Dickerson, who in his own right is an award-winning filmmaker. Dickerson talks a lot about the cinematographer John Alton, who he credits as really being the star of this film. film, as well as naming Alton as the #1 film noir cinematographer. In fact, Alton actually wrote a book about cinematography, and one of the most iconic images when you think of film noir is actually from this film, and it's from John Alton setting up a shot with a light and two silhouettes of two people, a man and a woman. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, it really is.
The film stars Cornel Wilde, Richard Conte as Mr. Brown, Jean Wallace plays Conte's girlfriend.
Bless her heart.
And I won't give too much else away about it because if you haven't seen it, it's just a taut, wonderful film. Here are a couple of folks I spoke to that shared some wonderful insights about their seeing this film. Tell me your name and where you guys are from.
Harry Murphy, Montclair, New Jersey.
Michael Murphy, Montclair, New Jersey.
All right, so we have a father and son duo here attending the festival. And how many years have you guys been doing this?
This will be our 5th year.
Wow. So we just all saw together the big combo. I would love to get you guys' impressions of it.
An all-time favorite, Richard Conte, top of his game, yeah. And of course, I prepped Mike a little bit for Fanti and Mingo, and we had just seen the two of them last night in totally different parts in Gunfight at the OK Corral. What else can I say? Yeah. Brian Donlevy, understated. Helen Walker, out of retirement or wherever she was from, doing great. Robert Middleton, I mean, just top-notch all around.
You listed so many of my favorites. Helen Walker was fantastic.
Oh, I loved her in all those Paramount pictures in the early 40s. Yeah. And the one with Tyrone Power and Joan Blondell.
Nightmare Alley.
Yes, that's a great one. That's a great one. What did you think of the film?
I thought it was great. I mean, it's like, what I love about this festival is that they'll program like a hard-edged noir at 9:15 in the morning, and it's like the kind of the perfect way to start the day. It looked great. If you've seen any of these other types of movies, any other noirs that have these, vague but really exciting titles like The Big Heat or The Asphalt Jungle, like the big combo kind of, you know what you want from it and it delivers. The restoration they played looked great, sounded great, the performances are great. Richard Conte is like weirdly likable despite being so evil, which I think in some ways makes him more interesting than the Cornel Wilde character. But I mean, it's less than an hour and a half and it's just a complete blast.
I love that. One thing about this film to kind of wrap it up is it was the final film of Helen Walker. And as you may know, we have dedicated an entire episode to Helen Walker. I think it was episode number 19. So make sure you check that one out.
Yes. All right. This next film you saw, I had seen it not too long ago, All This in Heaven too. What'd you think?
Yeah. I really like this movie. I'd never seen it before. It's from 1940, Warner Brothers. It's directed by Anatole Litvak, and it was introduced by the hilarious Mario Cantone.
Oh, I bet that was amazing. Especially with Betty Davis as the star.
And as you know, he's famous for his Betty Davis impressions.
Okay, how was it? Did he do it?
Oh, yeah, he did it. And it was great because he can do Betty Davis before and after the stroke.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, that's horrible.
Which is horrible and hilarious. But he was really funny. And he told a lot of great stories about the making of this movie.
Oh.
For people who don't know, it was written by Casey Robinson. It's based on the novel by Rachel Field. It stars Betty Davis, Charles Boyer, Barbara O'Neill,
who's
who
wonderful.
is spectacular. And people who may remember her, she played Scarlett O'Hara's mother in Gone with the Wind. And she's such a quiet, serene character in Gone with the Wind. Well, she is not in this movie.
She is an evil, evil woman.
Yeah, and also featured Jeffrey Lynn, Harry Davenport, Virginia Weidler, who we love, and June Lockhart.
Yes, all great. Betty Davis plays the governess to the children of the Duke, played by Charles Boyer, and his wife, the Duchess, played by Barbara O'Neill. While both the Duke and his children adore Betty Davis's character, the Duchess despises her.
Oh, yes, she does.
She is a nutty little woman.
Yep.
She is suspicious of the bond that is formed with the children, even though nothing untoward has happened.
Nothing.
As her behavior toward Henrietta grows more and more irrational, oh boy, it gets really tragic. And there are events that change their lives forever, which we won't get into because you want to go see the movie.
You don't want to give it away. But the cool thing to me was the novel it's based on a true story. The writer of the novel, Rachel Field, it's based on her great aunt, who really was a governess. governess for this Duke and Duchess. So it really happened.
I did not know that.
Which is cool. You know, the movie won 3 Oscar nominations: Best Picture, Best Cinematography from Ernest Haller, and the only actor who received a nomination, was it Bette Davis? No.
Was it Charles Boyer?
No. It was Barbara O'Neill. And when you see this movie, you will know why.
Yeah.
It is a tour de force performance for the ages. Well, one of the fun facts that Mario shared was that when they made the movie, Bette Davis did not think that Warner Brothers did the book justice by casting the very attractive Barbara O'Neill as the Duchess. She wanted her to be much more unattractive so that it would justify why the Duke was attracted to the governess. But, you know, Barbara O'Neill's a very lovely woman. Betty did not like it. She wanted her to be ugly.
Interesting.
Well, and Barbara got the Oscar nomination and Betty didn't. So there you have it.
Wow.
But yeah, really, really good movie. Great performances.
All right, you said great. I'm going to jump into this next one. Diamond Jim, 1935. This was introduced by Leonard Maltin, who said, "You're about to see a good film, not a great film." And boy, was he right. It's directed by A. Edward Sutherland, based on the novel by Parker Morrell, screenplay by Preston Sturges. It's a rags to riches, really fictionalized biography of Diamond Jim Brady, starring the always solid Edward Arnold. And it's one of the first times and only times that he gets to carry the picture.
And great casting, by the way. If you've seen pictures of Diamond Jim Brady, he's so well cast.
You know, and the story starts, he's working as a baggage master at a railroad. He's come from poor beginnings. He sees an opportunity, and his motto is, to make money, you've got to look like money. And he rents a suit, and he rents some diamonds, and he gets the job. And his life starts to take off from there. But his love life... not so much. His first love is played by Jean Arthur. She rejects him for another man, and that has stayed with him his whole life. No matter what success he has with money, that hurt is just always, you know, you can see it on him.
Never get over our first broken heart.
Right? Well, he meets another woman later in life who's the spitting image of Jean Arthur. Actually, it is Jean Arthur. She plays 2 different women in the film, and he falls in love with her. He also befriends the singer Lillian Russell, played by Benny Barnes, who's in a relationship with the handsome Jerry, played by Cesar Romero. Well, Brady goes through some financial ups and downs, and he has one demon. It's not alcohol, like you would normally think. His demon is food. He eats banquet tables full of food all by himself. And when he injures himself in an accident, the doctor basically tells him, if you continue to eat that rich food, you're going to die.
Very Henry VIII over there.
It is kind of. You know, he ends up learning that Jean Arthur, the woman he's in love with...
Which one?
Yeah, the second one, is having an affair with Cesar Romero. So both Benny Barnes and Edward Arnold are getting, you know, taken advantage of.
They should just hook up and have a happy ending.
Well, you would think, but you know what? They actually try that, and they just are friends. This shattered man ends up deciding that he is going to serve himself a big, huge meal. He's going to burn up all the IOUs that he has. He's going to sit down with a picture of his deceased mother, and he's going to eat a huge meal, which we know will kill him.
He's going to eat himself to death.
And that's kind of the movie.
Wow.
Yeah. So I shouldn't have probably given away the ending.
Wow.
But I feel like I need full disclosure with our audience.
Put down the popcorn.
Yes.
Have a salad.
Oh, God. It features William Demarest and Eric Blore, lots of other great character actors. But I just got to say, Edward Arnold.
I love him.
He is sexy in this role. He is absolutely magnetic. We know he's always solid as a character actor, and he can play that bombastic Diamond Jim part of the character. We've seen him do that in things like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But this role, he brings about this vulnerability. An actor cannot play loneliness, but you can feel the ache in Arnold's performance. It's just absolutely amazing. You want one of these women to open up their eyes and see this great guy. And,
of course.
And they don't, and he eats himself to death. Oh, God. I see why Leonard Maltin said it was a good movie and not a great one.
Well, you know,
anyway,
Edward Arnold and Jean Arthur are much better together in the movie Easy Living. If you've never seen that one, maybe go see that one for their chemistry and connection.
Good to know. All right, our last film.
Our last film was The Talk of the Town, 1942, and it's Columbia Pictures. It's directed by George Stevens, and we were so fortunate to have Alicia Malone introduce it with George Stevens' Stevens Jr., his son.
Who we really want to get on this podcast.
We really do. He was just, I could eat him up with a spoon.
Me too.
He's so cute and he's so smart and he had such great stories. It was such an honor to hear him speak about his father in this movie. Well, this particular movie was written by Irwin Shaw, who later became a novelist, Rich Man, Poor Man, Sidney Buckman, Dale Van Every, and it's based on a story by Sidney Harmon, who was coincidentally the producer of the movie The Big Combo. All connected. It stars Jean Arthur, Cary Grant, Ronald Colman, Edgar Buchanan, Glenda Farrell, Emma Dunn, a lot of great people. And for people who don't know the story, it centers on Leopold Dilge, played by Cary Grant. He's this political activist who's wrongly accused of arson and murder. He escaped from jail and he hides out in this cottage owned by his childhood friend, a school teacher named Nora Shelley, played by Jean Arthur. Well, he kind of has a thing for her. You know, this unrequited love from childhood. Unbeknownst to him, Nora has rented the house to this distinguished law professor, Michael Lightcap, played by Ronald Colman, and he is about to be appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. So, of course, this causes problems because Jean Arthur can't let Lightcap know that Dilge is there because he's a fugitive. It would hurt his chances with the Supreme Court. It gets very complicated, but Lightcap and Dilge, they actually meet and they really bond over justice and law and personal ideals. It's some really great dialogue between these two men and their thoughts on life.
With Lightcap not realizing
that he was this
Dilge is the guy,
wanted prisoner. Yes. Well, Nora finds herself caught between these two men because she's caught emotionally, and I think morally, between both of them. I think she's attracted to both of them. But
I think she's kind of in love with both of them.
I think she's absolutely in love with both of them, and you don't really know which one she's going to end up with.
Yeah, which is a great part of the movie because you love both Ronald Colman and Cary Grant. It's not Cary Grant's picture necessarily.
It's definitely an ensemble. Yeah. Definitely. Well, this particular movie, it received 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Writing, Best Editing, Cinematography, Score, Art Direction, everything except for any of the actors, which is a shame because I think any one of the 3 could have been nominated.
I agree.
And look for a very small role for Lloyd Bridges, who plays a reporter.
Yes. George Stevens actually started as a cameraman and gag writer at Hal Roach Studios, and George Stevens Jr., his son, talked about the fact that because of his father's involvement with Laurel and Hardy films in the 20s and 30s, he learned from Stan Laurel that comedy could be graceful and human. And you can certainly see that in this film. The physicality of each of the characters, it's seemingly effortless. It does have a grace about it.
Yes.
Stevens Jr. also said, and I found this fascinating, his father did not like the term screwball comedy.
Yeah, that struck me funny too.
He believed that comedy comes from believable characters, something he must have also learned partially from his time at Hal Roach Studios. And let's listen to what we had to say at the end of this film.
So Nan and I just watched the incredible Talk of the Town. And Nan, what did you think?
Well, I'm verklempt. It's.
I have to say, Nan is crying right now as we sit here.
It's so moving and so emotional because it's so pertinent. It's what we say on the podcast all the time about film and what it tells us about our culture. And George Stevens Jr. spoke about the fact that his father wanted his films to stand the test of time. And this film truly does that in our day and age.
Absolutely. It certainly speaks to us today, and it tells us a lot about our history, and I love that about this movie.
And Cary Grant, we always love, but Ronald Colman, talk about yummy.
And Jean Arthur, I'm going to say it, is a comic genius.
Yeah, she truly is. Physically as well as just her delivery. That was just kind of perfect.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this one, absolutely check it out.
Well, overall, 4 days, so many films. What an amazing experience. Can we just talk about the staff at TCM? The
thing that struck me the most, and this is our second year, it is the most organized, well-oiled machine that I've ever been to. I mean, they know what they're doing at TCM, and the staff was amazingly helpful and amazingly kind. You always knew where to go, and everything was beautifully marked, and it wasn't confusing. It was just such a well-orchestrated festival.
It really was. I also think that if it's on your bucket list, you got to do it.
You have to go.
Because it's heaven. It's heaven on earth.
And for me, one of the greatest things, I love seeing the movies. I love seeing the restorations. I love seeing movies I haven't seen. But to me, one of the greatest parts of the festival was the camaraderie.
Yes.
And the community. Everybody we met, they were so lovely and so open about sharing their thoughts and their views and their passions about movies.
Yes.
And that's what I love about this. It brings all these people from different walks of life together to really appreciate and honor classic film.
Yeah. In fact, let's end with a clip from 2 young people that we met at the festival. Tell us your names and where you're from, and then we'd love to hear what turned you on to classic cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Jacob Canepa, and this is...
My name is Mason Seeley.
Yeah, and we're both from El Dorado Hills, California. We both grew up together and met each other in high school. Both started, we both had our separate YouTube channels, just some dumb comedy and everything. And then a mutual friend introduced us, you guys got to collab on stuff, and then just took it off from there, So
what's your favorite thing so far at the festival?
That's a hard one because, everything's been really, really good. For me, Superman was a big highlight because I grew up with that. My mom showed me that movie. So hearing that John Williams score again on the big screen was super, super nostalgic. And then seeing new stuff like the Incredible Shrinking Man, being able to see special effects that old. And then on top of that, that was a surprisingly introspective film for just a sci-fi. Little treats like that is my favorite part of this festival.
How about for you?
I love seeing all the restorations of everything. I like to see all the 70mm screenings and all the DCPs. I'm big into cinematography and stuff like that. I love cameras. My favorite thing is 50s Technicolor. So I love the aesthetic of that. And if I can ever see a restoration of something like that, of course I'd go see it.
I love hearing young people like that excited about old movies.
Me
because
too.
One of the main reasons we do this podcast is we want to be the torch that passes along the information to the next generation. And I love when young people really love and appreciate old movies like we do.
Me too. Let's give the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Well, the question was about the movie The Big Combo. Who was originally cast to play the villainous Mr. Brown in the movie? In fact, he even shot some scenes before bowing out. And why did he bow out?
That would be Jack Palance, who was originally cast as Mr. Brown. And the reason he dropped out is he wanted his wife to play the girlfriend, and they wouldn't let him. And so he decided, I'm going to take my toys and go home.
Was his wife even an actress?
I don't know. But isn't that interesting?
I know. It would have been interesting, but I honestly think Richard Conte was perfection.
He was. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for listening this week and just for sharing the journey with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review, and also if you would follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we love hearing from you. Please keep those emails coming. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view
from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.
Welcome, everyone. Can't even say
we stumbled out the gate.
Word.